It's prog time. We're heading up north to visit with the Canadian power.
What was that? Shit. Sorry, I'm going to stop.
Pew, pew, pew.
All right.
Pew.
Okay. All right.
It's prog.
Go ahead.
It's prog time. We're heading up north to visit with the Canadian power trio Rush and their magnificent album Moving Pictures. Stay with us, eh? Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Dean Legiro here. Eric Kuber, somewhere over there. I see him on a screen, so he's here.
Hello, Dean. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Very good. Yes.
Yeah. So. And welcome, everybody, to the 3324 podcast. We firmly believe, and we have it ingrained in our soul as a fact, that this is the best place that you will find for music and movie podcasting. So thank you for joining us. Complete the process. You're doing the listening part. Let's get the typing fingers going. Join us on Facebook and Instagram at 3324 podcast. Great group of people over there. Great group of folks that interact and like-minded movie and music lovers as well. You can post stuff. We'll like it. We'll comment on it. It's just a fun thing. And then if you're into the whole Twitter thing, you can even tweet us at 3324P.
Yes.
The shortened version. It's
P.
like
there it is.
It's like a tweet. It's like a short, like chirp. So I got a short handle for us. 3324P.
There you go.
It's just
fantastic.
Right into the point.
Yeah,
straight
that's
to the
right.
point. Closer to the heart, or closer. No.
Ah,
yeah. Got that?
I see what you did there. That's nice. Very nice.
Little Rush. Little Rushism.
There it is.
First one. The first one has landed. So,
yeah.
So yeah, Rush. We're going to be talking about moving pictures.
Yeah.
Which probably. Let's get to the stats first, and then we'll kind of discuss, and we'll give you the usual rundown that we do. It's our commitment to quality. We're committed to quality product, and we're committed to also having things in order. So we're going to give the stats like we've done as we approach our 1-year anniversary. We're going to do it like we did from episode 1. We're going to roll the stats out. It's not going to change.
No,
because we're here to educate and entertain.
The format is the format.
Yeah, or entertain and educate, depending on what you find more.
Or maybe we just want to look smart. I don't know.
Well, you know what? I type it out, so I'm certainly not rambling it off the top of my head.
There we go.
I'll give you the inside. That's the inside baseball. This is a heavily scripted format here. We have roundtable meetings on Mondays. Tuesdays, we go over the script. Wednesdays, we rehearse it. Thursdays, we do a video version. Fridays, we do rewrites. And then we record on Monday. Is that right? Or is that just me?
And if you believe that, we'll tell you another.
I guess that's just me. I do all that. I wonder why Eric was never at the meetings. I was wondering, why am I doing this by myself?
Yeah, I'm kind of left with, just doing all the fun stuff by listening to the stuff, watching the stuff.
To the music, watching the music videos.
He's writing down the format and worrying about this.
I'm like
and
one
that.
of those monks in the Name of the Rose, like scribing and writing in the books
with the quill.
That's obscure, right? I went obscure on that one. Name of the Rose.
There you go.
Connery and Christian Slater before they were in Robin Hood together.
That was a great film.
I love it. So I don't even know if that's available anywhere.
I don't know.
F. Murray Abraham was the Inquisitor.
Yep.
Great cast. Oh, well, we're not here to talk about The Name of the Rose, but we're here to talk about Rush and their 1981 album, Moving Pictures. This was released in February of 81, produced by Rush and their longtime collaborator, Terry Brown. They're kind of like the tag team as far as production goes.
Yep.
It reached number 3 on the Billboard album charts, which is really nice for them. Oddly enough, or amazingly enough, I didn't realize, but 3 singles were actually released from this album. Tom Sawyer, Limelight, and Vital Signs.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
That's a shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it really is.
It wasn't, you know what? They weren't ballsy enough to release the Camera Eye, I'll tell you that. But at least they
yeah.
The record company was smart with that. It went 5 times platinum, so that's in excess of 5 million copies. And then there were also 2013 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees with a little bit of controversy, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well. There's a little issue with prog bands and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
of course,
and them getting in. So
never get their due.
let's start with the history of Rush and Eric, because Eric is the resident prog personality, and I'm kind of like I've said in the past, I'm like the Padawan. I'm like the Anakin Skywalker to his Qui-Gon Prog.
Well, yeah, I guess. It came to me. Rush was the first prog band I got into. Right, I think we covered this in bass player episode when I talked about Geddy Lee. Yep. My first prog album was 2112. Their 2112 album. My brother had gotten it for me for my birthday, and he said, you're into sci-fi and all this stuff. I think you'll like this. So I sat down, I listened to it, and yeah, sure as shit, I got into it because it was all the first side of the album. As you know, it's like this big, like epic story and futuristic story and whatnot, and then of course you had the second side, which was shorter songs, but I loved those even more. So yeah, then they kind of got me into other things, and they're actually the first band I got into, and probably the last prog band I got into well into the 90s, when I kind of stopped listening to prog for a while, when I became obsessed with like jazz and blues at that point in the 90s. So yeah, they were right there because they were the only band pretty much that were just still ongoing.
I was just going to say that the 80s were kind of like a wasteland for prog bands. Yeah. It was very much a creature of the 70s and the
right. Yep.
Yes, ELP, Rush, King Crimson,
Genesis,
Gentle Giant. If you want to really get obscure, there's a lot of these bands that did not translate into the 80s, and if they did, they did try and popify themselves a little bit more, as with Asia. Where that was a melding of a couple of literally of two bands,
and that was more or less AOR rock. It was
they're trying to get more
yacht rock, as it's I guess you could call it.
I think they made that decision in the heat of the moment. That's number 2.
Oh, there it is.
That's number 2. Prog joke number 2 just came your way.
Why do I feel like I'm in what's that movie with Steve Carell, the 40-year-old virgin, right? He's got the big Asia poster in the background, right? He's
That's it. We bought that when it came out. We were all
of course.
When that came out, I was like, oh wow, it's kind of like. And I was never a big prog fan, so I was like on the outskirts. Yeah. I liked Genesis through Eric, via Phil Collins, and more into their more popular stuff, right? Abacab and Points North,
right? When they became a pop. Yeah,
never into Yes, never into the we'll call it the longer winded stuff.
Yeah,
for me, Rush, I was much more. We talked about this in our U2 episode. I was much more aware of the iconography of the 2112 cover with the pentagram and the guy. People had that on jackets, and I was much more aware of like the logo of Rush and that kind of stuff. The covers. Than it was of the actual music. I didn't really it didn't really kind of hit me from what I was listening to. I mean, maybe Tom Sawyer, I think everybody knows the opening lick of Limelight, which is pretty much iconic. But like we said in the bass player episode, when we talked about Geddy Lee, it was, and I'm going to defer in respect to our Canadian brethren. And when I first heard YYZ instead of YYZ, they say Z up in Canada.
Zed. Oh, look at this. He came prepared, folks.
Oh, what do you think I'm playing?
Yeah, he did the research.
We're entering year number 2 of our podcast. We have to up
the ante.
Up the production value and the research. I mean, we got to put somebody on the books to do research. If you want to be a researcher for us, by all means, reach out. So yeah, I had heard that back in I'm going to say mid 80s.
Yeah.
And I told this story on the bass player episode, but no one listens to that episode. So we can just retell all the stories again.
Ooh. Whoa. Wow.
That was episode number 4. No one listens to it.
Well, now you have your chance. So
now you have your chance, and you can see if I tell the story the same way again to see if it's accurate or if I've embellished it. But
yeah.
Back in the 80s, the Monte Carlos and Regals were the car that everybody drove in the New York area, Westchester County.
Yeah.
And Alpine stereos and amplifiers in the back and massive speakers. And this friend of mine that I worked at a pizzeria with, we went cruising one night and I was sitting in the back of his car, and he didn't have speakers like in the back part. He had speakers in the back seats, like 2 giant speakers that literally I could put my arms on.
Yeah.
So it was literally like a 5-person car, but it was only 3 people, 2 in the front and 1 in the back, because the speakers had to take up most of the room. So he's like, "Oh, you got to check this song out. You got to check this song out." So he puts it on, and I was blown away. I was actually, and I can remember, it's one of those moments, musical moments, that I remember when I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like the instance, because I was so like, wow. And I was like, "What's the name of the song?" And he's like, "Oh, Red Barchetta." I'm like, "All right, cool. I got to find that out. I got to find that. I got to find that." So I went to like the Crazy Eddie or whoever it was, Record Town. I get the out. I find Rush, and it's like, "Oh, okay. It's on Moving Pictures, and it's Red Barchetta." So I get it. And I'm listening to it, and Red Barchetta comes on. I'm like, "That's not the song I heard.
That's not the song, right?
That's not the song I heard." Turned out it was YYZ. Which was right after it. So he was off by 1, and thank God he got the, at least he got the
side
on the album. Yeah, at least he got the album right. So I didn't have to go like try and find it. But YYZ absolutely just blew my mind. It's
yeah. I mean, Neil Peart I think he kind of just made the 7/8 time signature the standard. You know, he made it cool. I mean, a lot of other drummers were doing it back in the day. Bill Bruford, even Phil Collins, was playing like that. But Neil Peart came in and just boom. And it just, I mean, but he starts in 4/4, then he goes to 7/8, and it's oh my God, it's wild.
Yeah, it's a crazy ride, and it's such a fun song to listen to. But before we get there, little brief history about Rush. Formed in 1968, not with the lineup that we know Rush to be. There was a couple of Neil Peart wasn't really in the band, and Geddy Lee wasn't in from the beginning.
Right.
Geddy Lee joins, and then he's asked to leave. He's actually let go from the band. The manager at the time either didn't think he had the right look or whatever it was. They kick him out. They get a replacement. The replacement sucked. So they asked Geddy Lee, like, "Hey, can you come back?" And he was already like in another band, and he said it was probably more popular at the time than Rush, but he went back.
Yeah.
Then the drummer had kind of had enough of the touring lifestyle.
So he was burnt out. Yeah.
They get Neil Peart and they trim it down to a 3-piece, and then you've got what would be known as Rush, and
the definitive like power trio.
Yep, it's Geddy Lee. His name is Gary, but his mother is of Polish descent. She had such a thick accent that she would say Gary as Geddy.
Yeah,
and he became known as Geddy, and then he actually legally changed his name afterwards. So his name was actually Gary, but his mother named him, but her Polish accent was so thick that it was Geddy.
Yeah, my great grandmother was she was Czech, and she had that kind of an accent, so I could definitely hear that. In my head
when
right
you hear
now.
the story, it makes sense. It's like Geddy, Gary. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. And then you've got Alex, and Geddy is the bass player. He plays bass pedals. He plays synthesizers, keyboards. Alex Lifeson, who actually also his real last name is Zivojinovic, which literally means, when it's translated from Serbian, means son of life.
Oh,
and he took on the name Alex Lifeson.
Okay,
and he plays guitars, he plays synthesizers as well. And then you've got Neil Peart, who's just Neil Peart. No interesting story about his name.
Yeah, no,
but he's just a drummer extraordinaire.
Oh yeah,
and Neil Peart would become the primary lyricist. So when Neil Peart joined Rush, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson really had no interest in writing lyrics. Like, yeah, that's fine, do it. We'll write the music, and that's one of the things which is interesting. We talk about it, and I think in the Squeeze episode, when you've got a singular lyricist, you get a kind of a stable environment. And that whatever Neil Peart was into, so he was into the fantasy in the 70s and into the swords and sorcery and the mystical stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that they were laying out. And Neil Peart and Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson would put their music on it.
Yeah, it's ironic that they wrote the music and Neil Peart really didn't write. They kind of wrote that stuff for him. I mean, of course, he would take it to another level, but it is kind of strange that he would take on the lyric duties and write these really profound stuff and just brilliant guy. I mean, he was a total geek, though.
Yeah, very well read.
If
A
you
lot
if
of
you ever
reading.
heard him like being interviewed, I didn't expect. I expected this sort of like somber, brooding kind of a dude, like look real serious, but the guy's just a total like nerd, like just the way he talks and he's just he's like he's fooling around and he's like this and that and he's kind of an extrovert like within the confines of the band and what they're doing in the studio. He did not like being out in the public as much, from what I understand.
Yeah.
I think he had some issues with
not his forte,
right? Being around a lot of people and stuff like that. So yeah, which is probably explains why his drum set is so well behind and huge, and like he's completely surrounded by drums.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a wall, sealing himself in, which is
he's known for the
the
massive drum set, but it's not there for decoration. I think some people have those sets and
he plays it all.
They don't get
he
to
knows
a lot
how to
of the
work
drums,
that kit.
But he works the whole thing when you see him.
Of course, yeah.
And that's the thing about Rush is it's three virtuosos. I mean, you really are, and that's usually what you think about when you think about prog rock in general. You think long-winded. We talked about this before too. Long-winded solo. This is what you got when Rush first started. This is what you got. You got 10-minute songs, and they were in part 1, part 2, and part 3, and chapters, and albums with only 2 songs per side because one song would be like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That was the long-winded prog, but they were so good at it. They were just developing their style, developing their technique, and all 3 of them are just virtuosos. Absolutely.
Yeah. No doubt. I mean, a lot of, like I said, I mean, there are a lot of other bands that did it too, but it's just like they were always, I don't think they really knew what direction they wanted to go at first. I mean, they started the hard rock thing. I think they were listening to a lot of Zeppelin, a lot of, those kinds of bands. And then they just decided that, well, let's try this and really move into this sort of like, but it was all like hard edge stuff though. I mean, you think about like the bands of the 70s, they all started in a more sort of classical sense. They had that really classical sensibility, a lot of keyboards, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Usually when you think prog rock, you think Yes with the keyboard, you think
keyboards,
ELP,
synthesizers,
you think heavy, all that the organs, all that crazy
stuff. They
stuff.
didn't start playing keyboards until the 80s, ironically enough. So, which is when synth, became like used in a pop format, and that became the staple instrument, of the 80s of the pop scene. But so and a lot of people didn't like that. I think a lot of they were kind of turned off by that. They just, especially some of the albums that came out after Moving Pictures. I think this was probably the first album they really employed it.
Right before. Permanent Waves was the one before it.
Yeah,
and that was kind of like the that had Subdivisions on it. Right. And so that was kind of
Subdivisions was on Signals, which came out after.
Signal. Okay. So
that was 82. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Permanent Waves.
Spirit of Radio.
Spirit of Radio.
Yeah.
Okay. Which was
Free
kind
Will.
of that. Yeah. And you talked to, you had said when you listened to Rush in the 70s and then you kind of let him go and you caught back up to him in the 80s because the 80s was such a barren landscape for prog. Like people, especially with all the 80s music and the electronic stuff, it was very much a pop-centric era.
Yeah.
And Rush actually kind of started to understand that because they got away. This Moving Pictures is the last album that has like a 10-minute song on it because they consciously said, well, we're going to try and shorten what we do and make it a little more accessible.
That's right.
Without selling out though. See, there's a difference, right? It's kind of like some bands change and they just have a totally different sound. And it's like, okay. But with Rush, they kind of evolved. They were something, they were a particular band in the 70s. Right. And then when Hemispheres comes out, they in 1980, they start gravitating towards using synthesizers as the main sound and kind of replacing the bass. And then when you get to, it was Permanent Waves. Then when you get to Moving Pictures, it was full on. They were really embracing the synth sound.
And interestingly enough, it was the first digital recording, which I didn't even know they were recording digital in the early 80s. I didn't think that happened until like 85, 86, like further down the road. So that's interesting because the board that they had was a digital board.
Yeah, it was like a 48 track console too, and they had to
kind
figure
of
out how
makes
to
sense
use
when
it.
you listen to the album. You could I think you could tell, from the comparison from Permanent Waves, and that had that much more raw sound.
Yeah, it has a little bit of a different sound.
Yeah.
And then when Tom Sawyer opens up the album, it's like, yeah, you're in for something different. So yeah, they were looking for something a little more radio friendly. Started incorporating a little bit of a reggae influence as well. Was starting to kind of creep in.
Yeah.
Into some of those songs, where they started to embrace that a little bit. So there was some things that were changing within the band, but it was organic. It wasn't like, oh, we need to write a pop song. So no, we want to just shorten what we do. We're not going to change it because I don't think that Moving Pictures is a radical turn from the previous album.
No, it's not.
Just honing it in more.
It is, and YYZ.
There you go.
Actually, it is somewhat. You do hear that in a song called La Via La Strangiato on Hemispheres. There's a lot of YYZ in that kind of style, and that 7/8 playing of Neil Peart. A lot of it. In fact, it's almost note for note in one particular section of the song. But yeah, they took it and they said, we're going to do that, but we're going to make it shorter.
Yeah,
and
they wanted to revisit some of that stuff, but make it tighter and make it more digestible. Talking about the album cover and the title, very interesting. The album's titled "Moving Pictures," and the album cover and the back cover actually give you three different meanings for what moving pictures mean. So when you look at the album cover, it looks like it's a lot of some guys holding paintings, and they're actually moving them. Right, they're removing them from the museum, so they're moving the pictures. But also, if you look to the right of where the movers are, there's some people and they're crying because they're being moved by the pictures. The pictures are moving them emotionally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Then when you look at the back cover, it's a wide shot of that album cover, and it's a film crew who are filming moving pictures, which is what films are. So you actually get three. It's pretty clever. You actually get kind of three. They put like three meanings to the album within the cover. They kind of buried it, which is kind of interesting. So these guys are not slouches. They're smart guys.
And they're very very intelligent. They
very clever.
They do that kind. Well, I mean, they weren't exactly the party guys either. I mean, like Zeppelin, excuse me, AC/DC, and these guys were kind of like, partying it up. These guys were just strictly for the music. They didn't really do that.
No controversies, just like REM, same thing. Like they were good guys.
Pretty straightforward.
But they made great music. And that was the thing is, moving towards the more synth-driven material, less fantasy and magic. So Neil Peart also kind of shifted his songwriting. It became like more kind of story driven, but not in the swords and sorcery or fantasy style stuff. It was a little bit more contemporary lyrics.
Yeah. And
commentary,
day to day
commentaries on life,
commentary day to day.
Yeah.
Friends, that experience certain things in their life or something like that. But he would take it to a slightly more elevated level, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, just kind of exaggerated, like, for example, Red Barchetta is a story about, but it's a futuristic story about a guy being pulled over but he's being pulled over by hovering cars, like sort of a sci-fi setting, but it's about a hot rod, sports car, but it's, and the thing I think of in that particular instance is the Abrams Star Trek film with little Kirk driving
in the beginning.
And when he's driving that Corvette, and that's
they should have played that instead of Sabotage.
That's exactly what I think of when I think of Red Barchetta now. Yeah. Well, when I saw the film, I thought of that. So,
If you're new to Rush or don't really listen to Rush, this is the one album, and I'll be upfront. This is the one album I own on vinyl. I think this is the definitive Rush album, and it easily has one of the most iconic side ones in music.
Yeah. Pretty much.
The first side has only got 4 songs, but they are it's home run after home run. Especially, it starts with Tom Sawyer, which is if you listen to this podcast, you must know Tom Sawyer. Let's put it that way.
Of course. And if you were taking drum lessons back in the day, you wanted to play. Tom Sawyer was like one of the songs that you wanted to learn how to play. Let's be honest. It was on everybody's, to-do list of or wish list of songs that you have to learn how to play Tom Sawyer if you're going to be a drummer. That's like, the ultimate song.
Probably I'm going to say this in relationship to the rest of the album. It's probably the most basic opening beat. Know? But and I'm saying that in relation to everything else, not saying that it's easy.
It gets going. It gets going. Yeah.
But yeah, it's got an iconic beginning, and it's just like that was FM radio ready. That was like one of the FM staples. That and Limelight were the two. I prefer Limelight over Tom Sawyer. I just love the opening riff.
It's got a great melody.
It's Zeppelinish. It's heavy. It's like got that heavy. But then it just morphs into Rush, with again embracing those keyboards, and so it's a nice meld and nice blend of the two of kind of the old Rush and then what they were starting to gravitate towards.
Yeah, and Geddy Lee's voice. I mean, we haven't really talked about that yet.
Distinctive. There's only one.
Well, let's put it out there. I mean, are you? A lot of people are turned off by his voice. What do you think? I mean, I think it's a great thing because it's a human voice and it's very unique.
That's what I was going to say.
That's what makes part of their sound. It's like it's an actual component to what they say, to their sound.
Yeah, I think it's an acquired taste. I think it might be an acquired taste where you're like, oh, I got it, because it's not a falsetto per se, but it's high. It's in the upper range, so it's kind of like, oh, well, what is it? A girl? Because it's got those qualities to it. Because again, he's not trying to sing like Barry Gibb, like high falsetto. It's just that's his range. He's got a very high range. So I could understand where people are like, ugh, like
Well, it is.
But I think you have to give it a chance.
It can be very grating, right? But prog music in general is like that. It's an acquired taste. I think not everybody gravitates to prog rock. It's not as accessible.
Yeah.
Or at least it was like that in the 70s. You really, there was it had a certain fan base where you're, and I don't know why I ever got into it, to be honest. I mean, I'm certainly not a genius or anything like that, where I think of like these mathematical equations when I listen to the music. To me, it was always about the stories and just the perfectionist attitude of the musicians. I think that's what attracted me. These guys didn't seem like they wanted to fool around. They everything they played was to perfection, almost like a classical musician, right? If you're in a symphony, or a jazz musician, it
wasn't hook laden like pop songs. Right. Progressive music was more about thoughts and expanding and taking an idea and then expanding upon it.
Right.
Giving everybody a shot, which is where YYZ comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think that's probably if you don't want to listen to Geddy Lee sing, you can listen to YYZ then and get everything you need to get out of Rush. And that song kind of really lay dormant for a long time. And then it wasn't until the video game Guitar Hero that that song became available. And then it was one of those things that people were not aware of it. And they were like, holy crap, this song is just absolutely insane. Yeah. And the fact that they would play it regularly live would scare the crap out of me. I'm like, I'm not sure I want to hear them do this live. It can't be what they did in the studio. It's got to have too much studio trickery or too many edits to get it right. No, but God, they nail it.
Every time
they play that song live, and you have to listen to YYZ. It is absolutely just an amazing. It blew me away, and that's what got me into Rush. I'm like, this is an absolutely amazing song.
Yeah, probably one of the the greatest instrumental tracks, and I think it was nominated for a Grammy. It wasn't a hit, but it was nominated for a Grammy for Best Instrumental Performance. I think that year. But yeah, it's a monster.
It's got everything in it. It's just got got like that's the thing about Rush too. the songs or the production is well balanced. So there's you hear the bass when you need to, you hear the guitars, the synths, everything is just kind of, it's not everything is, it's not a mush of everything like all sloppy. Everything is just well separated. You can kind of, you want to listen to the guitar, you can pick out the guitar and listen to it. You know, it's not just in a musical salad of sound, you know, which I really like about Rush is everything is just really well defined. The bass is really like, just, you can really hear it. You can really pick it out. And they just make music really well together. That's the thing.
They do. And when you have that kind of well-oiled machine and you consider how long they've lasted, that to me is amazing, because they never seem to have, there was never any, I'm sure they had their ups and downs just like any other band. And I'm sure they, they might've gotten sick of each other, but you never really, they kind of been through, a lot together, and through thick and thin, and they were always there for each other. And even when things did go wrong, they gave each other the space that they needed, take the time. Like when Neil Peart was having problem, when his wife, I think it was his wife or his daughter died.
Both.
He went off on that journey across, Canada and America. He took that, he's riding on his motorcycle, writing his, these journals. He basically
said, I'm retiring, but they kind of didn't. They just let him do what he needed to do, and then he came back on his own.
They gave him that space, and he's a brilliant writer. I don't know if you've ever read any of the stuff that he's written, and not songwriting, but just the journey that he took, and to find himself and the soul, and it's just. That's when I really got into the guy, like as not just as a drummer, but as a person, and boy, what a loss, when he went, it was, oh God, that was tough. Yeah. That was a tough one. Yep.
Yeah. And that, again, if you're a drummer, there's plenty to pick out. If everybody's a virtuoso. So that's the great thing. It's not like, oh, they're known for their drummer only. It's like, no, they're known for their bass player as well. And they're known for their guitarist as well too. So there's so much there. And when you get, and it's funny with Moving Pictures, it's kind of like the last bastion of their prog roots, right? Because the first side is really very accessible songs. They're relatively short and they're really riffy and got really nice hooks to them.
Yeah.
Then when you get to side 2, you get like the last vestiges of like their prog. Because you get the Camera Eye, which is like an 11-minute song, give or take. And it has all those. They do allow themselves to expand on some of those ideas again, almost it's almost like a farewell to that style of prog. Because again, it's not like they said, "Oh, we're going to make pop songs." They're still making progressive rock. They're just changing the container that they're putting it in.
Yeah, Witch's Hunt, the second track, is the first song of a 3-song cycle called the Fear Trilogy. So they would have there's a song off of Signals that's part of that, and then a song way ahead off of I believe it's not Presto, but one of their later albums. I think it was maybe Arrows, and but certainly one of their very last albums. There was the third song of this trilogy of
Grace Under Pressure. There was one I think from Grace Under Pressure, and then Vapor Trails.
Vapor Trails. Thank you. Yeah. That's the one. Yep. And I think that was probably their last great album. When they returned to form after they kind of shed all the synths and went back to heavy guitar work, and even Neil Peart, which impressed the hell out of me as well, is like he started taking lessons again. This is like, he's considered one of the greatest drummers ever, and he reinvents himself by taking lessons from a jazz player. So he completely changed his style of playing, like the way he even holds the stick. It was like more traditional jazz, and that was amazing to me. It's like he humbled himself to think that I'm not going to just rest on my laurels here. Yeah, I still have more to say. Let me do this. And oh God, it's such an amazing, again,
more to grow, to continue to grow.
The guy. Yeah.
I think that came about because he was doing he was going to be on a Buddy Rich tribute or something like that.
Yeah.
And he practiced the song that they were going to do, but they ended up doing an arrangement that he wasn't ready for. So he felt like, I wasn't even prepared to kind of play in a different way. And then, he was talking to Steve Smith from Journey, who who had also underwent some changes in his style. And he said to Steve Smith, well, who did you contact? And he said, oh yeah, I took some lessons from so-and-so, which is the guy that Neil Peart sought out. But then he ended up taking lessons from a guy that was like an acolyte of I can't remember the guy's name, but basically taking lessons from someone else associated with him. So yeah, you don't really hear about that. No. Especially late in life. Most of the times you hear about artists that are like, I don't really practice anymore. Like I only play when I need to, when we're going to go on tour.
Right. Or they end up losing something like, oh, I don't remember how that went. And
or they shortcut it.
They got to redo it. But yeah, I mean, for him to go back there and to do that. But then again, if I was actually, when I was in, after Moving Pictures, I found myself like getting every single album. And because they were the only real prog band left, or at least I wasn't really into like the metal prog bands that came out more prevalently in the late 80s and the 90s. But which Rush probably inspired, by the way, they probably were the first, heavy sort of prog band in that real guitar driven kind of thing. But I ended up finding myself like just buying every single album, even though some of the stuff wasn't that great. Mm-hmm. And I could definitely tell it. Neil Peart was a little repetitive. I mean, he was playing the same riffs again, the same patterns on a lot of songs. You listen to something like "Time Stands Still" from "Hold That Fire." It's the exact same time signature and the same thing from Subdivisions. Like it's like with that when he was playing that cymbal, like it's the exact same pattern. So it's So he was repeating himself and very repetitive style of playing, which is probably why he just felt, when he was under fire from these guys, like I got to play this particular piece. Whoa, like I can't, that's So you gotta humble yourself, So
it's pretty interesting that he would do that. Like I said, not a lot of people not a lot of musicians are like, I play what I play. We go out on tour. I know what songs we're going to do. I really don't need to do anything. So the fact that he was still taking that journey and still kind of like, still a student, I guess, is pretty amazing. So back to Moving Pictures and, and some of those lyrics, if you talk about Limelight, that is about Neil Peart's reluctance to embrace his celebrity. It's literally about that. And there are some references to some other lyrical references when he says all the world's a stage, that's a reference to
Shakespeare.
It's to Shakespeare, but also to their first live album, All the World's a Stage, which was influenced by that. And then there's another lyric, living in the fisheye lens, caught in the camera eye, which would then call back to the very next song on the album, The Camera Eye. Yeah. So it was very clever. He's a very clever lyricist and probably very underrated. I think Rush fans obviously know, but usually for the most part, when you listen to rock bands, you assume that the person singing it is the person that wrote it.
That's right.
That writes the lyrics. Like it's just assumed. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's just kind of like, oh yeah, he probably wrote it.
Yeah.
Not the drummer.
No, certainly not. Who cares about the drummer? Nobody.
Especially the drummer that doesn't sing, right? So it's not like Genesis where it's Phil Collins and it's like, oh, Phil Collins probably writing this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, which would be probably the left hand or right hand to the other of Rush. And as far as in 80s, as far as popular progressive music goes, probably probably Rush and Genesis were like the two last bands standing that were able to make any kind of sense of the music scene in the 80s. And Rush did it one way. Genesis started veering towards more pop stuff, but they would still put those prog songs in there.
Yeah, there was always at least one long, what they call long songs in their albums.
Still like kind of hang on to it, as much of a direction they were getting pulled into, and because they were getting very popular as well. So that was Genesis was a different thing because it got so popular because of Phil Collins that Genesis couldn't help but kind of steer a little bit that way. So it's not like Geddy Lee had a solo career where he was so popular doing something totally different that it influenced Rush. Rush just kind of was always an encapsulated group that never really worked with guest musicians or extra people.
No.
It's if you look at every album, it's just the three of them and Neil Peart plays the drums, and then everybody, there's Oberheim and Moog synthesizer and this one and sequencer and pedals and this and that. They all just played everything, which is amazing as well.
And the thing of it is cool. I think we talked about this in the bass player episode as well. It was always a concern, like, how is Geddy Lee going to, do we need have to hire another person now to play keyboards while I'm playing bass? But no, he did it simultaneously. He managed it with bass pedals and with
foot pedals and
he would just switch off. And and unfortunately I never saw them live.
Yeah, me too.
I wish I had. They're one of the bands that just got away. And but yeah, it would have been great to have seen it at least once.
Yeah,
I don't care what tour, it just but they just
because you would get a greatest hits just as well.
Of course,
it wouldn't be a miss.
It was just after a time, they just stopped listening to that kind of thing, and it just you get into something else, and then you just go off on another tangent.
And speaking of live shows, very prolific with live albums. I mean, these guys put out like a lot of live albums, especially in their early days. I mean, All the World's a Stage was 76. Right after Moving Pictures came out in early 81, in October of 81, Exit Stage Left came out, which was, do you know where Exit Stage Left came from? The inspiration for that title came from?
I don't know.
Snagglepuss. They wanted him on the cover. That remember the Exit Stage Left.
Okay,
Heavens to Murgatroyd. It was from that, and they wanted to use his image, like his tail, like on the album cover, and they were like, it's just going to be so much money that it's not even worth it. So they had a sense of humor as well.
Yeah.
That
like I said, they were nerds. They're all three of them were like you could see them sitting there watching cartoons rather than out there partying or getting girls in the room. Right? They're sitting there probably backstage.
Yeah, and Geddy Lee was very much into baseball memorabilia. He was a baseball collector, collecting baseballs and all kinds of stuff like that, and a big Detroit Tigers fan. Then he became a Blue Jays fan. So yeah, these are just kind of like workaday guys, and like the normal guys, not the big rock and roll style, just kind of great musicians that would always get together. And that was the thing; everybody knew their role, so they know that Neil Peart's going to write the lyrics. And then Leifson and Geddy Lee would write the music. And it's such a great, like when you've got that partnership, like the boat doesn't get rocked because someone's not trying to say, oh, this is my, can I get more of my songs on, or this, that, and the other thing. It was a collaborative effort.
It was. And, they understood the introvert. And that's probably why I got into them in the first place. Because and Subdivisions to me is like probably my theme song in a sense. Like, they talk about living in the suburbs and going to high school and having problems and sitting in the back of a car, right? We did all. I'd like, this is about me, like, wow, this is crazy stuff. Going to the mall was a big thing in the 80s, right? I mean, going to the Galleria, that was a thing.
Conform or be cast out. All right. I mean, that was like kind of,
that's right.
And that's from their follow-up album to this.
But
Signals.
With Signals, but I just felt like that was my theme song, and a lot of us felt that way, I guess. Well, I don't know about you, because you kind of like were on the cusp of being pretty popular.
I felt like the New World man.
Not the analog man.
Not the analog. No, not Joe. Well, now I am just like Joe Walsh. I'm an analog man in a digital world.
Okay.
All this stuff comes. You can find a music title to fit your life for whatever stage you're in.
There you go.
But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about progressive rock and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And this was a big thing, right? Like, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has gotten a lot of derision because of groups that are let in and types of music that are not recognized for some, or never even get nominated. And one of the big things was there was never any progressive rock bands getting into the Hall of Fame. None, never. And it was always like a thing. It was like an obvious thing. It's like, well, how come Yes isn't in, or how come these other ones?
Because they're not cool.
Jethro Tull or whoever.
Because none of these people were considered cool. They were not popular.
Who was prog in the beginning as well. Glaring omissions in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it became a thing, like, and people started writing about it. Like, there's no progressive rock bands in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Why? and a lot of them say, well, Jan Wenner, who's the, was he the editor of Rolling Stone or whatever?
Yeah.
But he's also the chairman of the Hall, and said, well, he doesn't like progressive rock. So that's, they're never going to get nominated, which is really just a stupid take.
It really is. I mean,
it really is. And so finally Rush gets nominated and they get in 2013, and you got to go see their induction. Dave Grohl inducted them.
Mm-hmm.
But then did you ever see the acceptance speech?
I did, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So Neil Peart comes up first, and he's so grateful and this is great. I didn't think I'd care, but I do. And he's great.
yeah.
Like Geddy Lee says his piece and does it, and then Alex Lifeson comes up, and he just really it was his speech was long.
It was,
but it consisted of one word said different ways. He just said the word blah, 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 blah. He roasted the Hall of Fame on the Hall of Fame stage because of all the nonsense that those progressive rock groups went through. I think, you know what, I'll put a link to the video in the show notes and just check it out. He roasted them without ever saying a word. He only ever said blah, but he literally did 5 minutes of blah, blah, blah of having a conversation and talking. And that it was such it basically was that this whole thing was such nonsense and BS. And he made his, he said it a little bit differently than Steve Miller did when he got inducted. Steve Miller didn't have two nice things to say either about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So as many people as honored, a lot of people also deride it that are in the Hall of Fame themselves. They're not, it's not like, oh, I got in, so I love it. They're like, I got in, but I still don't understand what this is about.
Well, it's the fans that matter. I mean, everybody has their, like I said, everybody has their demographic, their little niche to go to. And I guess prog rock was considered, I guess, pretentious and pompous or whatever, because these guys were like, these virtuosic musicians. They weren't playing the basic three chords and sloppy and whatever. But I don't know.
It was as important as any other
why is that
genre of music in rock and roll.
Nobody says anything derogatory against the Beatles for being virtuosic musicians.
Or even anything in the 70s, right? But
I got to be honest. Some of these guys are much better musicians than the Beatles ever were, and yet they get all the credit and the praise for being like the most creative and all this stuff. And I got into this stuff first before the Beatles, and I could never understand what the big deal was about the Beatles until much, much later on. And I said, yeah, but these guys, these guys are too artsy and they're this and long songs and blah, blah, blah. And,
but that was part of the landscape of the 70s was the splintering of music into these different genres of progressive rock, southern rock, heavy metal, classic rock, blues rock, Zeppelin. All these different artists started to experiment with different types of music and adapting it to what their sensibilities were. So it's not like progressive rock was this outlier of all the other music was the same. It was like there's so much different stuff, the singer-songwriter, acoustic stuff, so much different stuff going on. I never understood why progressive rock would be targeted as something that would be exempt from recognition, because like you said, it's almost sometimes you're almost getting the cream of the crop as far as musicianship. Exactly. Now, maybe it's long-winded, but that doesn't mean it's like unlistenable.
Right. Exactly. That's why, I guess it's more, like I said, it's more akin to like listening to, classical music or a long stretch of like jazz like that goes on for like 15 minutes. A lot of these jazz artists in the early, like Miles Davis, they only had like 3-4 songs on the records because it was just these long big pieces of but when you listen to this stuff, it's not just they're not just playing the same thing over and over again. It's made up of different parts and
like movements or sections.
Exactly. So it's almost like you're getting 4, 5, 6 different songs within a song. So it's like a suite, so it's,
sweet.
That so that in itself, and these guys were like what in their 18, they were in their early 20s, and I was always blown away that these guys were so talented that
and
they
just
could
thinking
do this
on that
kind
level.
of stuff.
Just thinking on
absolutely
on that different level of songwriting and it wasn't like the 3 chords of I want to hold your hand and la-di-da. It's like, no, we're going to take an idea and just really see where it goes. So it had that free form aspect of jazz to it, where it's just kind of like, we're going to go and we're going to see where this goes, and we'll let the keyboardist run for a while, and they'll go and riff, and then we'll let the guitarist do what they're going to do, and then we'll gather it all back together and we'll close it out,
And these guys will tell you, they'll turn around and say, hey, we were inspired by the Beatles. We were inspired by these jazz artists. These are the guys that they did this because of what they did.
Yeah, and this is what they're hearing as a result of it.
Right.
This is like in their mind, this is what they're pulling out of it, which gave you all in the 70s. Like I said, in the 70s, gave you all these splinter genres of everything that was happening. So so much going on. So to wrap up, moving pictures, is this the one? Is this if you're going to go and get one Rush album?
It's the third for me of a trilogy I love Hemispheres, Moving Pictures, and I'm sorry, and Permanent Waves. Those three albums in succession
in a row. Yeah, those are the three in a row,
are my
right?
three favorites. So I don't think I like any one over the other, but Moving Pictures certainly is the most accessible, and it's it is. If you're not a Rush fan, this is the album to go to.
Would you call it the pinnacle of what they were doing? Would you put it that way, that because Hemispheres was the closing out of kind of an era for them?
Yeah.
And then Permanent Waves was kind of like the transition.
It was,
and then Moving Pictures was kind of like the final statement of that.
So like you said before, it's refined.
Yeah.
So there is that refinement to it. So yeah, this is the album. If you're not a fan, if you've never heard them, this would be the first one to check out.
Moving Pictures.
Yep. That's right. If you get a little bit, like I said, like the second side, you're still getting a little bit of that old 70s prog, but in a 4 or 5 minute song rather than 15 minutes.
And again, as much and they were embracing the 80s aesthetic with the synthesizers too. So it wasn't like they were throwing back to their old prog. They were just using the new tools and using the new toys and what they were embracing as far as their songwriting and getting it done. So Moving Pictures, absolutely check it out. It's the only one I own. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's the one that I gravitated to, and I'll pull that out and listen to it. And it is absolutely a classic among classics. I think it's the pinnacle of what they were trying to do for me. As far they kind of expanded on it going further, and they had a lot of popular songs after. But I think pound for pound, this one kind of encapsulates everything. Especially that first side is just it's a knockout punch.
Ironically enough, I think I read that was it Rolling Stone that took the poll that I think in 2020 or 2020, it might have been this year, they said that Moving Pictures was actually the best 80s album of all time.
Wow.
That's a bold statement.
Must have killed them to say it.
What they said, it was like, it was the strong contender was a Depeche Mode record. And this was supposed to be the biggest or the most, not the most popular, not the best selling.
Certainly wasn't, but
the great, like considered, and this was a poll that people took, and then the results was Moving Pictures by Rush was the greatest album of the 80s.
I think for 81, it was probably ahead of its time for what they were doing. So I think that might have done it. Is they were on the the bleeding edge of what was going to be happening with music. And they had the foresight to adapt, and that was the thing. They transitioned from the 70s into the 80s quite smoothly. Yeah. And as a result of doing it quite smoothly, they actually got more popular without selling out. So we're going to advocate for that. We're going to say, go get Moving Pictures, and we're going to link the crazy Alex Lifeson Rock and Roll Hall of Fame acceptance speech. You can check that out too. So if you want to see how strange these guys are in a good way, and how they weren't afraid to thumb their nose at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame while getting inducted, it's a fun watch for that as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324
and be sure
podcast.
to pull out your air drums. And
for YYZ, absolutely.
When you're cranking up YYZ, pull out your air drums. Yeah, because you'll have a lot of fun with that. So
yeah, and your arms are going to be tired by the end. It's nonstop. So
it's a workout.
If you're into the air drums, it's a non-stopper. So that is going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast, celebrating Moving Pictures from 1981 by Rush. We've got a treasure trove of other episodes for you to check out. So once you're done with this one, why don't you go to work on some of the other ones? Pick out something else that you like. we'll see you there, and hopefully you'll join us for ones in the future as well. So for Eric, this has been Dean. We will see you on the flip side.